She was also selected as one of the 9 women in energy uh, entrepreneurs by Shell Foundation, DFID UK, and DST India. At AGT, the waste is converted to the biogas, which is used as a clean cooking fuel, thereby reducing the fossil fuel usage by the biogas plant owner as well. The digestate produced in the green organic fertilizer, thus putting the waste back into the soil and serving as a circular economy solution. AGT, along with its partner company AES, has set up more than 16 biogas plants all over the India in various food kitchens and market yards. Uh, Disha ma'am, can you have your experiences on? Can you please share with us?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And so I do have some slides, and maybe that will help people pictorially see some of the work that we've been doing. But feel free to interrupt me however you guys feel comfortable, whether you want to focus on the background or the career or the actual technical stuff of what you do. It's really your session. And I'll be an open book. Whatever I know, I'll share. What I don't know, I'll tell you. I won't make it up. So if it's okay, can I share my screen so that I can kind of take them through my deck?
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Okay. So is this, let me see, how is it showing up? Is the screen clear or do I have to change the size?
It's clear, ma'am.
Okay, because I have a PDF. I've changed it to a PDF so we don't have any problem here. Is this okay? Okay. All right. So I think I wanted to start with my journey, and you've actually outlined most of it pretty well. The only thing I like to add was that I have also did all my schooling in Hyderabad, after which I went to Chaitanya Bharati Institute of Technology for chemical engineering. And then, with all the peers applying to the US for masters and PhD, landed up in a PhD program in Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And again, there, not knowing exactly what to focus on, there was a lot of biotechnology, enzyme engineering, biocatalysis focus. So I got exposed to, the biotechnology part, which is really good because that is kind of what my company is doing now. In chemical engineering, we didn't really get exposed to it much. But during my PhD, we focused primarily on biocatalysis. And then towards the end of the PhD, got a job at Amgen in process development and manufacturing. So again, typically chemical engineering concepts and chemical engineering kind of background fits very well into these kind of departments, both in the US and in India. So what Amgen does is they make biotherapeutics. So it's injectables, protein injectables. And of course, there's also companies which make oral small molecules. So chemical engineers fit in very well in these kind of companies. So we did a lot of process design, manufacturing. We would do work in the laboratory, and then we would have to scale it up. So how would we actually manufacture it in an actual manufacturing setting? What are the regulations by the FDA? And what would the process look like? If there's a deviation in the process, how would you deal with it? Would you release the drug or not? Because it's ultimately going to patients. So got exposed to a lot of that. And also, of course, the general way how industries work in the US. So I worked there for about 11 years. My whole goal was, going to the US was to get a higher education. And definitely give a lot of perspective. And also the working in the US exposed me to a very different work culture. The ethics of it, the way the drugs are manufactured, and the level to which everything has to be correct, following the rules and regulations. So that was a really good learning experience for me. But I always wanted to be back in my home country. And I got back 3 years ago, and I wanted to not get into a traditional job, not that there's anything wrong with it. I wanted to do something wherein I could make a difference. And based on my, just started to brainstorm what are the problem statements that I could solve, what is it that's around me, as well as what are sort of some of the resources that I already had. So my father actually started Ahuja Engineering Services more than 30 years back when I was back in school. But that time the focus was, he's an electrical engineer from Pilani. So the focus of the company was to do turnkey electrical contracts.
Chemical engineering.
Am I clear?
Yeah, I'm clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry for the disturbance.
Okay, I'm just giving you a little bit of background because I'll be happy to interact with you if you have any questions about entrepreneurship or working in industry and things like that before I get into what we are doing now as a company. So we had a whole staff of 20-25 people. A lot of them have done their diplomas. And then they have really gotten experience on the field. So they are actually very good engineers, even though they have not gone through a typical engineering degree. Most of them have a very good skill set in manufacturing, tanks and electrification of industries, and done work on the field in the last 30 years. So in the last 7 to 8 years is when we started working along with IICT, Indian Institute of Chemical Technology. You might already, all of you know the CSIR Institute, and they do a lot of technology development, and they like to have the capability to do the scale up, the manufacturing and actually implementation in commercial. So we joined hands with IICT. They had something at the lab level, and we did a pilot initially. So we put in our own resources, and then we identified a space. We started getting poultry waste, food waste, all kinds of organic waste. We built a plant, not knowing what the final design is going to look like. We, based on our engineering understanding and in our team's experience, we built the plant. We ran it for about a year. And by doing so, we were able to attract a lot of the waste generators, like commercial kitchens, who have a lot of the food waste. They are constantly cooking. So they have food waste that typically goes in the landfills. We have poultry farms wherein poultry litter is a huge problem. They have tons and tons. Typical poultry farm will have anywhere between 30 tons to 50 tons per day of poultry litter. And it's a huge nuisance to dispose of it. It causes environmental hazards. It causes ammonia in the air. So that is something, again, that is a substrate for biomethanation. So we studied that. Slaughterhouses. So there are so many slaughterhouses in the country. India is actually, 70% of the population actually has non-vegetarian food. So what happens is these slaughterhouses, everything is in closed doors. Right now they are dumping the waste or it's going to landfills, right? So again, these kind of wastes are again very amenable for biomethanation. All of our vegetable mandis, market yards, there's a lot of waste every day that, the contractors are hired and they have to take the waste and they go and dump it in Jawahar Nagar. So Jawahar Nagar is our landfill site in Hyderabad, for those of you who don't know. So these were the problem statements that were right in front of us. So what we started doing is we started to design what would a commercial biogas plant look like, wherein all of these kinds of waste can be input to the plant, and then the energy that is coming out, we will be able to make it economical by pipelining it back for thermal use. So that is a little bit, what I want to show you in some of the pictures as well. And please feel free to interrupt me if I'm going too fast or something is not clear. So I'll give you a quick overview of, what biogas, what is the process flow, what I'm just talking about, but what are the details, what do we do in our company, the different scales that we have already implemented commercially. And then finally, we can open up and talk about any opportunities in interacting with, students like yourself and working, in our company as well. So essentially, this is what it looks like. So we have organic waste and all the different things that I just mentioned are the problem areas. And it goes through a process called anaerobic digestion, which again, you might be very familiar with in your chemical engineering textbooks. So in the absence of oxygen and the presence of microbes, the food waste and other waste gets digested. And then it produces what is known as biogas, which is essentially a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide. And methane is the one which has the calorific value and heating potential. Now, after anaerobic digestion, you also get the slurry, the waste liquid slurry, and that is what is used as a biofertilizer or a biomanure, similar to the compost that most of you are familiar with. So the biogas here is further upgraded or purified. So once we do that, it can be used in the form of what is known as bio-CNG. So it's it's biologically made in an anaerobic digester, and CNG is compressed natural gas. So all of you are familiar with CNG vehicles. So this is actually very similar to that, but a much simpler gas, less impurities. So that is being used as vehicular fuel. It can also be converted into electricity or being directed for thermal use. Now, in our process so far, we have been taking the biogas, removing H2S, and then directing it either for heating applications or for electricity. And in the future, we want to go towards larger plants wherein we can also go and use it, use a bio-CNG for vehicular use. So this is something that last night when I was thinking about what is it that I want to share with you guys, my 9-year-old actually came and asked me some questions, and he's seen our plants. So he does already have some background. But from a 9-year-old point of view, it's so simplistic. He has drawn the circular economy model. So if you look at, this in the center, it's food, plants, right? So we grow the plants. We get our food, we cook it, the waste is going to a biogas plant. From the biogas plant, you get biogas, which is then again directed for cooking, right? And then the biofertilizer that you get goes back into the soil to grow your food. So it is a very simplistic model, but one that makes sense for waste management and to get a circular economy. Essentially, wherein all different sectors can make it profitable and solve a environmental problem as well. So I just wanted to share that because I thought it was really interesting that even a 9-year-old can really understand it. Now, how many of you are aware that there's a biogas plant opposite your Kinera hostel, inside your hostel premises? Anybody has seen it? So are you
No.
chemical engineering or different departments?
Yeah,
Chemical
chemical,
engineering.
food and textile. Yeah.
Okay, and do you stay
Yes,
in the
ma'am, we have seen.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I
Okay,
got
so-
to know after seeing the YouTube video, ma'am.
Yeah, so I think that it's a pretty big structure in the sense that it's right outside your hostel. It's a green green structure. You'll see that in this video.
Yes.
I like to just share this video with you, and that will really help you get oriented on what this technology is. It's a quick 3-minute video. Hi, I'm Disha Ahuja from Ahuja Engineering Services. We we are into fabrication, installation, and commissioning of turnkey waste-to-energy plants. Here I am today at one of our locations inside Osmania University campus in Hyderabad, where we are converting their canteen food waste into biogas, which is used back into their kitchen.
So recently, we installed a biogas plant. So right now we are utilizing for the hostel cooking purpose very effectively. I suggest all the hostels, institutions, those who are maintaining these hostels, so they can also utilize this particular facility biogas plant very effective. So by that, you can save money and you can also protect the environment.
Only
Hi, I'm Shruti and I'll take you through the live demonstration of this plant. So let's enter the plant and see how it works. This is a waste reduction unit or a crusher which will reduce the size of our waste and convert it into a pumpable organic slurry. This part is now followed by the process of feed preparation or hydrolysis, where the entire organic waste is converted into a homogeneous slurry. So after the feed is prepared, it is pumped into the anaerobic digester system, which has a unique design. From here on, the digester basically does the rest. The anaerobic digester generates biogas on a continuous basis, and it is stored in these intermediate biogas holders or biogas balloons. Now let's see how this biogas is finally used in the kitchen. So we are inside the kitchen now, and the biogas pipeline that you saw outside is continuing into the kitchen and is connected to two dedicated biogas stoves that we have provided. A 300 kg per day biogas plant typically can replace close to 1 cylinder of LPG on a daily basis. So now that we've seen the entire process and features of our plant, safety is of utmost importance to us, and we have ensured that the safety is inbuilt in our plant design and engineering. We also give a lot of importance to the aesthetics of the plant. As you can see, this is suited for urban locations and has a very compact footprint. We also ensure remote monitoring on a daily basis. Okay, so hopefully, now you guys can go out and see what that plant really does. Right now, I think your kitchens are shut down, so they're not actively operating it. But once your kitchens are back, the plant should restart. We'll restart the plant. And that helps you understand, what I've been speaking about so far. So again, since you're engineers, I thought I should just show you a quick process flow. So what you just saw in the video is, the feed input is going to a crusher or a size reduction unit. From there, it goes into a feed preparation tank. From the feed preparation tank, the slurry is pumped into the digester. That is the main heart of the operation, the anaerobic digester. And from the digester, we have some slurry that is being used as a digestate, and then part of it is also recycled back to save water. The biogas that is obtained is purified, so we remove H2S, moisture. We also measure the flow of the biogas. We have intermediate balloons to store the biogas. And then finally, we have a compressor, so we can pressurize the gas, put it in a pressure tank, and that helps us get a good user experience in the kitchen. Similar to how your LPG, comes under pressure, we also give the biogas under a slight pressure and connect it to the stoves. So again, just to put things in perspective, right? So what am I talking about? So we have LPG, which is used, everybody is familiar with LPG and now PNG as well for cooking. But what is LPG? It's a mixture of various hydrocarbons, predominantly propane and other alkanes. And LPG has an inherent calorific value. right? Around 47 megajoules per kg. Similarly, biogas has about half or less than half of that calorific value, but it is predominantly made of methane and CO2. So it's the methane that is burnt and can be utilized for its heating potential. We can also direct this biogas into biogas generators and convert it into electricity, although thermal use is the best, to get the full efficiency of the plants. Similarly, in the future, you'll hear a lot of talk about large bio-CNG plants coming up. Again, bio-CNG is nothing but purified biogas. So the methane is further purified. So you get more than 90% of methane. Now, this is very similar in calorific value to CNG, which everybody is familiar with, this CNG cars and vehicles. So CNG is again predominantly methane, but other alkanes. Whereas bio-CNG is a simpler gas, simply has methane and CO2. So very few impurities. So when it burns, both biogas and bio-CNG is actually much safer for the environment, because you're not burning these fossil fuels, not utilizing them, and not letting out these other gases into the air. So just a little bit about our company. I already mentioned that, we've been around for more than 30 years, but in the last 7-8 years, we've been focusing predominantly on waste to biogas plants. So we are a team of about 30 people. Now we have, PhDs, engineers, diploma holders, and a lot of very skilled staff with good hands-on experience. We also have an in-house laboratory. We have pilot scale, we have fabrication as well. So all the equipment that you saw, the digesters, the scrubbers, the pipeline, everything is being manufactured in-house. So what we need to do is we need to look at all of the process design. What is it going to look like? What are the process flows? What are the pumps? What are the tubings? What materials to use? So it's very much, very good chemical engineering or engineering sort of focused work that we do. We have more than 18 plants already all over India. So the one that you just saw in Osmania University can process 300 kgs per day of waste. And more recently, we've commissioned a 10 tons per day plant. So that's 10,000 kgs of waste is being processed in a day. And this plant is actually inside Bonpalli Vegetable Market Yard. And it's open for those of you who are interested. We can talk about having a site visit to something like this, I think, which would be very interesting for you to see a full-size working plant with all the process flows and things like that. So this plant right now is processing the vegetable mandi waste. So they have about 10 tons per day that is wasted or is not sold. So the farmers, once they get the waste, don't really have the resources to take back what they are not able to sell. Unfortunately, that is the situation in our country. So all of the vegetable mandis have tons of waste that is not sold, and then it's directed to the landfills. So again, just quickly showing you some of the different scales and designs that we have already implemented commercially. So on the left is exactly what you have in OU. This is also inside CVR College of Engineering. So it's a 300 kg per day plant. On the right is a vertical digester. So this one, you can handle 1 ton per day or 1,000 kgs per day of food waste. So we've set it up in almost 12-13 Akshay Patra kitchens. So Akshay Patra is a huge organization that makes midday meals for schools, for children. So they have a lot of cooking that they do, which means that they generate some of the food waste because some of the cooked food waste comes back to them. And also they have a high utilization of LPG, right? So what we are doing is we are helping them reduce their LPG consumption by directing this biogas back into the kitchen. So it helps them manage their waste at their facility, as well as helps them reduce the fossil fuel usage. So again, these are some of the larger plants. So I mentioned that our landfill site in Hyderabad is Jawahar Nagar. So this is actually owned by GHMC, managed by a company called Ramki Enviro. So we've set up a plant here which is handling 5 tons per day of waste, which is actually a very small amount for a large dumping site like Ramki. So they have set it up as a pilot. You know, for them it's a pilot. But here, since they don't have a utilization of heat, they don't have cooking, you know, large kitchens happening, we are converting it into electricity. On the right is a plant that I was just mentioning to you about. This is inside Bonpally Vegetable Market. So you can see, you know, there's conveyors because we have a huge amount of waste that we handle every day. We have almost 10 to 12 staff that operates this plant on a daily basis. A lot of women are also employed, which is a really proud thing for me because a lot of these people, you know, don't get good jobs, or a lot of these rag pickers and, you know, waste collectors. For them, this is a much better environment, you know, working in waste management and doing the operation of a plant like this. So you can see the gas is in the balloons, and then we also have generators on the side where we'll convert it into electricity, as well as we'll direct some of the gas to their kitchen. They have a small kitchen there, so they'll be able to use it for cooking as well. So I welcome you all to, you know, we can talk about the logistics, and if there is a good interest, we can have a group of you come and interact with our engineers on the site and take a look at this plant. So we have, you know, developed a very good lab now, wherein we do a lot of the testing. So why do we have to do testing? Because we need to make sure that our process is working well. You know, our biogas efficiency is not reduced. It is not as simple as putting something in, crushing it, and you get the product out. There's a lot of process parameters that have to be maintained. You know, so we do a lot of these tests in-house. You know, we are looking at our feed characteristics. We are looking at the biogas composition. We are looking at the digestate characterization. We have to maintain temperature. We have to maintain flow rates. So on a daily basis, there's pH and other kind of parameters that help us understand, is the plant functioning optimally? And also we get requests for a lot of new kind of organic waste that have not typically been subjected to biogas plants. So there's a lot of different kind of industries which have only one kind of waste, like a lot of these food processing industries, slaughterhouses, there's like palm oil industry. Agricultural waste is also a big thing now. So we are now continuously getting bombarded with all these different industries and saying that, okay, other than food waste, you know, this is what we have in our industry, can be subjected to biomethylation, and what would be the economics? So we start with a lot of this work, you know, in our lab and in our pilot scale, and we try to get some techno-economics for them. And then of course on the right, you can see that we are fabricating the digester as well. So this is a digester before painting. This is our laboratory that we've expanded also in our industrial area in Nacharam. So again, it's very close to Osmania University. So you can see we have quite a few equipment. We have a lab in charge. So we are able to do a lot of the process monitoring there as well. So I won't get too much into the team, but I can send you these slides later. But I like to open it up to discussion, you know, on what questions you have and what you guys would like to focus on, and any interests that you might have to interact with our company in the future.
Yes, ma'am, we are interested in joining with you. Like it was amazing video. First of all, I want to say that, and we are excited to meet you and coming to your labs and all. And seriously, Nacharam is very close to our Osmania University. As soon as, if possible, if college opens, we will be surely coming to your laboratory.
Sure. So I think in general, we have had postgraduate students before. So we're also talking to some master's students. So what happens is that when the students are interested, they're contacting us or their professors are contacting us. But typically, this is, as you can see, this is not a IT-based company wherein you can do things offline. Unfortunately, this is a very hands-on kind of experience. So in the past, we've had students who've been able to come and dedicate time. So maybe 2 months at a time or 3 months at a time in their summer holidays or in their last semester as part of their project. And then some of them have stayed back as well. So after they've completed their post-graduation, they have stayed back for a year. In fact, right now, our lab head is somebody who, again, has worked in IICT, CSIR, and joined full-time with us. So typically, we need, if people are interested, they would definitely need to have a good chunk of time, at least 2 months, I would say. Wherein we can then help identify a certain project for them, that, okay, this is the problem statement that you're going to solve. And then it would involve both hands-on experience in a lab like this, along with our lab in charge, and also the whole experience of where is all this going? How is this connected to the plant? So like I said, Bonepalli plant is sort of an open thing to learn from, in terms of how all the machinery works, what are the practical problems that happen, how are we tying in this lab data to a practical full-scale plant. So that kind of exposure will be available, in both a functioning plant as well as and of course the manufacturing also happens in Nacharam. So that visibility is also there as to how are we actually putting everything together. So any questions from the people?
Yes, ma'am. Like we first of all want to ask you that what will you suggest if after completing our BTech from Hyderabad, if you are looking for foreign studies, so either we need to go for PhD or MS or MTech.
If you're inclined towards further education in your field, definitely I would say a master's or a PhD will definitely give you that exposure and put you at a level where then you can get some job experience as well. So I think even in my time, I think 20 years back is where I had applied. We didn't have an opportunity to do a lot of internships or take a break and get work experience. I think the US has a lot of those kind of things. So I don't know, is it good to take a break or not? In my experience, I did my undergrad at the same time in the third year, applied for the master's PhD program. Once I went there, I was able to decide, I converted the master's to a PhD. Usually in PhD programs, the time that you take, then you actually learn something. Usually in a master's, it's a year, year and a half, 2 years at the most, and it's all coursework. But in a PhD, you really are solving a problem. So it's not as much as what you do PhD in, it's more of the problem solving skills that you get, the hard work that you do, the detail orientation that you do, how do you think, how do you read papers, how do you interact with the peers. So that is what a PhD will give you. It's not, oh my God, I have to study for 4 more years or 5 more years. It's the peers that you interact with. It opens up a whole world of possibilities, and you will grow in that 4-5 years of time frame. And it doesn't even matter what you're trying to do, because like I said, I didn't know what I would do a PhD in. I ended up in a biocatalysis lab. Then I went to process development, and now I'm doing something not exactly what I did my PhD in, very different from that. But the whole experience definitely helps you in thinking, in problem statement, in your approach to whatever you do later on. So I would encourage you to get that higher education based on your interest, of course, even if it's a master's. And then once you go there, you can really understand what else you can do. There's some people who go on to get an MBA after a master's. So it's really definitely higher education does help you and puts you at par, when you apply for a job. But if you just do an undergraduate, you always have, you will not be able to get, even if you get a job, it's hard to grow. But if you get a postgraduate degree, definitely puts you over an edge, and you can grow within the industry as well.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And one more question, ma'am. As we all know, you also have a company, Waste to Energy. So, if we are planning to put a company or a plant, so what will be the basic rules and regulations that we need to follow, and what basic knowledge we need to have first of all, and what are the things we need to keep in mind before putting a company or a plant? Can you please say this, ma'am?
See, honestly speaking, right after undergrad might be a little early. Of course, I'm not discouraging anybody who already has a bent of mind or resources, but definitely get some higher education. For me, when I came back to India, I felt in the last few years, even now, there's been a lot of help in people who want to have startups. Okay, and personally, when I came back, I didn't start the company on day one. I joined a program which was specially for women entrepreneurs, and there are many such programs in India right now. So what it was is it was inside IIM Bangalore. They have something called NSRCL, which is their entrepreneurship cell, just like you have eCell. And they had a free program wherein we had to pitch our idea. So we literally I was literally, you know, taking a piece of paper and putting down, okay, what are my problem statements that I want to solve? They gave us templates. Okay, this is if you were to have a startup, what are the different things? What's the problem statement? What will the business model look like? You know, what is the market strategy? So all these things I got exposed to, okay, the textbook knowledge of MBA, which I did not have any information on. In fact, in a job, you don't learn most of these things. And I interacted with a lot of other women who were also doing this. They were literally trying to have a career change, or had a startup idea, or had startups which they wanted to grow further, or had companies which they wanted to grow further. So they were in different stages of life. So it helped me with the textbook knowledge. They also helped me with the networking part of it. They also gave some funding with which I was able to do some of my initial lab work. So, and then we got in touch with a lot of mentors, just like you have mentors now in eCell. A lot of the alumni from IIM are available, you know, to talk to. So as this process happened, I attended a lot of classroom sessions as well. So over a year, I got all this exposure. Towards the end of it, I also applied to the Shell program for women in energy. So again, based on what you're doing, so many programs for people who are in IT or energy or manufacturing. There's so many startup programs nowadays. I'm not saying that everybody has to do these, but even if you do one of these, it kind of helped me get the initial network and get the understanding of what is it that you need in a startup, like what you just asked me. We had some information on legal, some information on regulatory. How do you register a company? Should it be private limited? Should it be LLP? Should it be a proprietorship? So and how do you do your website? At what stage do you do it? All these things were introduced to us in those small programs, and they were practically free of cost, and they even gave us funding. But once I did that, then there's no more need to keep doing those. You know, you do one program or two programs, and with that, you know, I was able to register the company. And now also there's a lot of programs from DBT, Department of Biotechnology, wherein, or like right now we have applied to BIRAC, right? That's under DBT. So there's a lot of funding given for, things where you are trying to do, you implement your research and trying to make something commercial. So in this case, we've applied for waste that we have not done so far. You know, like we are only commercially, we have done food waste and vegetable waste, but there's other kinds of waste that I mentioned to you that needs more R&D. So the government has programs. So we have as a company applied to these programs. And if we get that funding, then that is one of the biggest things that you need, you know, the funding. With that funding, we will be able to show the pilot scale, you know, scale it up. And with that, we then talk to our customers that, you know, we know how to do it, and now we can commercially do it for you. So that has been my trajectory. But of course, there's people who already have the resources and or already have some business in the family and things like that. So there's a lot of ways to approach it. I would say that if you have a passion for something, something you want to do, definitely go for it. There is a lot of momentum in the country wherein you can get that support and get that network. But it's not something that happens overnight. I have been here for 3 years. I'm still a startup. I'll still be a startup for a few more years. So you have to stay at it, and your ideas might change, but you have to develop your team. You have to develop your business idea. We keep interacting with customers every single day. We have inquiries. We spend a lot of time knowing that the business will not come. But what is the problem statement? What is it that they want? And can we give that to them? Right? So still our country is not really, there's no penalty for not doing waste management. On paper there is, but in practice, people get away with it. So how do you so from my area especially, right? But at the same time, we are getting customers who want to do the right thing, who want to spend the money for waste management. So there's a lot of different things you might be working on. And so you have to kind of stay at it. So it's perfect to get work experience and then do this or start with this. It's really up to the individual how they want to approach it.
Okay, ma'am, sure. One more thing, ma'am, safety precautions we need to take. Like yesterday, we can see that at Sangareddy reactor blast in Pharma company. So 18 injured in this. So to avoid these things happening, what precautions we need to take? What your company will be taking mostly precautions, and
so our
what
company,
equipments we need?
Definitely that kind of explosion happens with chemicals and high pressures and things like that. What we do is first of all not hazardous, right? We are putting in, so there's no chemicals involved in the process. We don't deal with high pressures, so there's never been an explosion or anything that can happen at the pressures. What we are doing is we are pumping things into the digester, and then the biogas comes out. Maximum at 4 to 5 bar is what we are storing in the pressure tank. So we are not at all dealing with high pressure processes. And on top of that, we do engineer our tanks to have safety valves and safety regulators. So if something were to fail, just like your pressure cooker, right? We have safety valves built in so that the pressure will automatically be released. In fact, throughout our process, we have at least 20 points in which the pressure automatically will get released if it gets built up anywhere. So we have designed our process in a way that there has never been a pressure situation. And we understand, and of course, like I said, the pressures are also low. But at the same time, we have pressure valves, pressure regulators, and a lot of it is automated as well. So we have a control panel. So we can see we have alarms that ring. So it is not a chemical process. There's no fumes that are being emitted. The methane is being burned or directed to a generator, right? So it's a completely closed process. The H2S is removed in a closed manner. So there's nothing toxic really that's happening. In the lab, there's some reagents and stuff that you use. So you use it with your normal laboratory, how you do things in your lab, right? With gloves, lab coat, glasses, proper shoes. And then you pretty much, deal with the solvents and things like that, which is not, again, toxic. It's similar to how you would do your lab work. And a lot of it is aqueous because we are dealing with food waste, right? So we literally take food waste, put water, and then we do our analysis. So sometimes you need acid and bases to do your titration and things like that. That's pretty much it.
Okay, ma'am. And ma'am, I came across that you made a sensor to detect and qualify CO2 gas. Can you know about that? It's really interesting.
Yes, we initially were looking at that. We did make it. So it is an IR-based sensor. Right now, we're actually using something that we bought commercially. So there's a lot of companies who are selling biogas sensors. It's nothing but IR-based chips. We don't manufacture the IR-based chips. You can easily get it from China, from UK, and then you incorporate it along with your, you make some circuitry to read it. So essentially what it does is based on the wavelength and the frequency, right? It will detect how much of a particular gas you have. So right now I have a handheld IR-based sensor in which we can detect both methane and CO2 and H2S. So we just take that sensor and we are able to measure how much gas we have. So it's a pretty common approach. It is both electrochemical. For some gases, we use an electrochemical approach, and for methane and CO2, we use an IR-based approach. For oxygen and H2S, we use electrochemical. So these are pretty common. We tried to make it ourselves because we were not very happy with some of the handheld sensors that we were getting in the market. You know, like they were not giving us good results. So we thought, why not we get the sensor and we do it ourselves? So we did do that, but since it's not one of our products, we didn't develop it further. It was more for our own sort of lab use.
Okay, ma'am.
Kind of things that we've done. So we have somebody who's in IT in our group, and you know he has helped us made an app. So when I talk about process monitoring, right? We have developed an app which we are giving to all of our plant operators. So wherever we set up our plants, whichever city, whichever state, the plant operator has to feed in the numbers in the app, like what is the pH today, what is the amount of food waste, what is the biogas meter reading, what's the pressure, what's the temperature. And then we are able to get this data remotely. So it's app-based monitoring. So similarly, you know, there are people in our lab who will just for fun develop like entry and exit. You know, they've developed an app in which when you come in, it does face recognition. So there's a lot of, you know, good ideas like that and things like that that we are developing similar to that sensor. You know, we just did it for fun. Can we do it in our lab and can we actually measure it ourselves?